If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by portrait photography, or just at a loss of what to focus on to take you to that next level, then come hang with me. I help guide portrait photographers just like you to stay clear and sharp in camera and with your goals. I'm your host, photographer, educator, and weirdly positive mama for Emily Supio. And this is the Stay Focused podcast. Photography advice to help you stay focused. Well, hey, you guys, and welcome to today's episode of the Stay Focused podcast. As always, thank you for deciding to press play on today's episode. I know that you are very busy, especially during this time of year, and I love that you took the time, carved out the time in your day to learn a little bit more about photography so that you can take those pictures that you're really confident with and that you really love. So on today's episode, I want to talk about something that I think we forget a lot, especially as newer photographers. We forget this thing because there's so many other things going on when we look down at our camera that we're trying to learn that we forget about this thing. And no, I haven't told you what it is yet, but we forget about it. And it's actually one of the more, if not the most important thing when it comes to learning photography and when it comes to taking great pictures. And I'm not going to tease you too much longer about this thing. It's not actually that secret. You know about it already. You probably just don't put the time into really understanding it the way you've put the time into understanding your camera and how to make your camera work. Okay? So are you ready for it? Did I keep you in suspense long enough? All right. And you've probably already figured it out if you looked at the title of today's episode. But what we're going to talk about today is light. More specifically, the natural light that is around us. I think it's a big misconception newer photographers have that you have to have fancy light setups, or you have to understand flash or off-camera flash, or you have to go out there and buy all of this, lighting equipment to take great pictures. Or on the other hand, the other misconception is once you invest in all of that lighting equipment, that's all you need to take a great picture. That's totally wrong, okay? Whether you're working with natural light or you're working with light equipment, you have to understand how to use it. Now, I work mostly with natural light, so that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode. Today is how to get the light to work to your advantage. And this is actually a really cool episode today because you don't even need to have a DSLR or mirrorless camera. You don't need a fancy camera to understand light and take great pictures with light. If right now all you have is, your camera phone, then using light can really make or break your picture, and it can make your pictures with your camera phone look great or not so great. So we're going to break down today how you can use light and what you've got to be aware of with the light so that you can get those professional looking pictures. Before we start talking about light though, I want to invite all of you to join me in my free 1-hour photography class, the 4-step framework to confidently shooting beautiful portraits. If you are newer to photography, or really if you just need a refresher on how to take great pictures of people, maybe your own kids, maybe you're just starting to take pictures of other people's kids, this class is perfect for you. And did I mention it's totally free? Just register by going to cozyclicks.com/framework. This direct link will also be in the description or the show notes of whatever podcast platform you're listening to right now. All right, so like I said, today's episode, we are going to tackle light. And I think light is one of those things that we kind of push to the side a little bit, especially when we've just got our new camera and we're worried about all these buttons and dials and manual mode and our focus and, what settings do I put for this kind of photo or this kind of photo? And light seems to just kind of fall to the side a little bit. But the thing is, light is probably the most important thing to be focusing on to take those professional looking gorgeous pictures, because you can have all your settings set right. You can have everything set up correctly on your camera to get your pictures in focus. But if the light is bad, if your lighting doesn't reflect your vision, if your light is just flat or unflattering, your picture's gonna look bad. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat it there. It's just going to look bad. You've got to have a good understanding of lighting and where to place your subject in order for your pictures to look good. And I get that there's a lot of moving pieces in photography and there's a lot of things to focus on with your camera, but really, light is so important, you guys. And like I said earlier too, these tips we're going to go over, you can even do these with your iPhone or your camera phone if that's all you have right now, okay? So let's talk about light for a little bit. And I like to use this analogy or this visual, I guess, because I think it's something that we all have done at some point or another. And that's the selfie, right? Like we've all taken a selfie. Well, most of us, I think, have taken a selfie. It wasn't a thing for me, 10 years ago, I wasn't taking selfies or I didn't have my camera and take pictures of myself. But now with our phones, we take selfies, or maybe you're even taking a selfie with your kids. And you can shake your head or raise your hand. If you're not driving, you can raise your hand right now, but let me know. Have you ever, flipped your camera phone around and looked at yourself to take a selfie and you're like, oh, no, I don't look good there. And so you move a little bit and you're like, oh yeah, I look better, here. Why? Why do we look better in one spot? And when you turn your body, you don't look quite as good. Well, it has to do with the light, and you're probably not even realizing it when you take that selfie, that when you turn your body and move around, the light is changing and it's making you look different, right? And sometimes when the light is coming from, underneath us, or the light isn't in front of us, we look, older, or we get those heavy shadows. We don't look quite as beautiful and flattering as you guys know you all are, right? But when we turn and we face the light, or the light hits us in a certain way, we look a lot better. And when you're taking that selfie, you might not have even realized it, but it's the same thing that you have to do when you're setting up your shot with your fancy camera, okay? You've got to really take a look at your subject. Do they have that unflattering light when you look at them with your eyes? If they do, it's going to look unflattering in your camera. So you either have to readjust your subject and where they are, or you have to readjust yourself. Maybe you've got to walk over to the side of them, or get down a little farther or up a little farther in order to adjust the light and how the light is hitting them. A lot of times what I do is adjust my subject, and I just keep taking a step back and looking at them and seeing, okay, is the light hitting them weird? Is the light making them look good? Is the light making them look not so good? And it's really taking the time to just step back and see that and really look at the light, okay? Remember, light is so important. Now, one of my favorite ways to light my subjects, or one of my favorite places to take my subjects when working with natural light, is somewhere where it's super easy. It's a garage. Okay, I've used my garage so many times because it offers beautiful light. When you open it up and you place your subject in solid shade, or the shade of your garage, and when you open that garage up, the light from the outside kind of flows into that garage. It can give some beautiful light for your photos. If you have not tried this before, I highly recommend this. I also do a short training inside of my free 1-hour class that I talked about a little bit earlier in today's episode. So you can see the visual for that and exactly how I do that. If you can't, because I know this is an audio show, right? You're just listening to me right now. So you can't see exactly how I would set this up, but you can see it in my free class. You can see how I do that. But really, using a garage and putting your subject in the shade of the garage, opening it up to let in that beautiful natural light, will give you some really beautiful, professional looking photos. Okay. So first, Make sure that when you step back, the light looks flattering, and think of it the same way that you do when you take a selfie. Some light looks better than others, right? My second tip with light today is to look at or to use your garage as a light source. You might not have thought of this before, but the light from your garage will really give some beautiful, flattering light. And then the third thing that I want to talk about today is really being aware of heavy shadows and heavy highlights. So those areas that are really dark or really light when it comes to light. And again, going back to that selfie, we've seen those heavy shadows under our eyes before, right? They're not always just under the eyes, but they might be, anywhere on your subjects that is unflattering. I know one of my students was showing an example in our community a few weeks ago where she really didn't like the way the shadow affected the neck of her subject. She didn't like the way that it looked. It was very, very heavy. And doing things just like having your subject lift their neck or elongate their neck a little bit or just turn their chin to the side could have eliminated that. So step back and really look at your subject for heavier shadows or highlights that might not look really great. Because a lot of times, like I said, it's just simply, moving their chin over or just slightly moving your subject a little bit that's going to help that light look that much better in the final product. Okay, and then finally, when it comes to light, well, actually not really finally, because there's a lot when it comes to light in photography, but for the purposes of today's episode, so we keep this nice and short and sweet for all of you listening, and so that you can actually learn something and really take action from the few tips that I've shared today. I want you to realize with light that it is not all created equal, and the time of day you choose to take your photos is going to make a difference. So for example, if you go out at 12 noon when it is bright and sunny and there are no clouds in the sky, and you place your subject in the middle of a field where there is no shade in sight, you're going to find those heavy highlights and heavy shadows, just like we talked about in the last tip. So all light, all time of day is not created equal. However, if you put your subject in that same field 10 minutes before the sunset with the sun setting right behind them, you're going to create a beautiful, lit, gorgeous sunset photo. So make sure that the time of day you're shooting is providing the most flattering light for your subject and for the entire image as well. And if you're not sure when that is for you, try a few times during the day. I don't know if you have a big open field to go place your subject in, but pick one area that you really like and do this little experiment where you take your subject, and if you don't have kids or you don't have someone to work with, take, a stuffed animal or an apple or whatever it is you want to take a picture of, and place that in that whatever location you want, and take a picture, at 8 o'clock in the morning, take a picture at 10 o'clock in the morning, take a picture at noon, take a picture at 2 o'clock, take a picture at 4 o'clock, take a picture right before sunset, and then go back and look at all of the differences and see how the light hit your subject, placing it in the same area, and see which one is more flattering. See what time of day is better for you. And well, I love shooting at the golden hour, that time right before sunset. Maybe you do prefer that noon setting. Maybe it works better for you and your style and your vision for what you want. So I encourage you, I guess, to try that last little challenge over this next week or two and see what you think when it comes to light. But above and beyond all of the things we talked about today, just make sure you're being very intentional and really paying attention to the light too. And I know that there is a lot going on with your camera, and light is just another thing that you have to add on to your plate when it comes to photography. But I promise it is super important. And when you focus in on that and are intentional on that, you're going to start getting those pictures that you really, really love. And you're going to start seeing results with your pictures. So make sure to pay attention to that, okay? Now, if this is the first time you were listening today, I would love if you would take a second and head over to iTunes and hit subscribe. That way you don't miss next week's episode or the week after that. New episodes do come out every Wednesday, so make sure you hit subscribe over on iTunes or on YouTube if you are listening on YouTube. We've just added the Stay Focused podcast over there too. So if you're listening, if you happen to stumble upon it over there, make sure to hit subscribe. And then if you are over on iTunes, I would so appreciate it if you would take a second and leave a rating and review for the show. It helps the show be seen by more photographers just like you who are looking to learn more and get more confident with photography and their skills. All right. Again, thanks for listening. And until next week, here's to staying in focus, in camera, and with your goals. Bye, you guys.